Amendments. And I'll also introduce myself, Brian Kiza, working with Customs Tariff in URA. I'll also take the opportunity to introduce my panelist, Mr. Judo Cheng, supervisor with Customs Tariff, and that is URA, Customs Department. Maybe he can say a few remarks and greet you all.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jude. So back to our major topic today, which is going to be tax amendments. We are going to dwell into these tax amendments, and mainly we want to see how these tax amendments are able to help us support our nation's industrialization and manufacturing development plan. And the idea is to make sure that we're able to create employment in our economy, add value to our raw materials, enhance and increase our exports at the end of the day, so that we're able to contribute to our GDP. So without much ado, we are going to dive straight into the matters. And I would want our panelists to explain to us and give us insight in what tax amendments are, and whatever goes on after that. Yes, Jude.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Basically, when we talk about tax amendments, we refer to changes in our tax laws, changes in our tax policies, amongst other changes. And each financial year, we do have a number of amendments that affect our tax laws. As customs, we are mandated with handling imports, goods that come into the country, and as such we operationalize different tax laws, amongst them our Customs Management Act, our VAT Act, which is basically our domestic tax laws, our Excise Duty Acts, amongst other laws that we utilize to enable clearance of goods at importation. So each year in the policy formulation phase, we have changes to take care of country positions that are designed to drive certain country objectives. In this case, for Uganda, we have a very strong policy direction towards development towards import substitution and export promotion. And as such, you'll see that our policies this year are geared in that direction.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jude. We know that among the changes that we have what we call stays of application. Can you give us more details on how these stays of application are able to, which stays of applications we have, and how are they able to help us contribute to our industrialization as well this financial year?
Okay, at importation, one of the schemes that government utilizes to support its agenda is what is called a stay of application. And a stay of application is basically where we set aside our common external tariff, the rates that we have therein, and utilize rates that are different from the ones in our common external tariff. And a stay of application can be upwards, meaning that the rate that a country can choose to utilize could be higher than the rates that are provided for in the CET, or could be rates that are lower. So for example, if the rate of a product is 25%, to protect local production, the country could choose to apply a higher rate, like 35%. Or in case a good is of importance or to the social welfare of Ugandans, they could choose that whereas the rate is 25%, as Uganda we intend to import it at 10% to reduce the costs of those goods for the Ugandans. So that is basically what stays of application are. And a number of them, now we have such number of stays that are available this financial year.
Okay, thank you so much for that insight. can we have a few examples of those stages of applications whereby we have the rate moving from a lower rate to a higher rate so as to protect our local manufacturers?
Okay.
Just a few.
Yeah, so this financial year, we had a number of stays. I'll briefly present some of them. We had a total of about 15 stays this financial year. One of them is on raw materials imported by manufacturers of gloves or packaging materials. This category of stays, as presented there, we had the rates reduced from 25% to 10%, or from 10% to 0%, as indicated on that list. These are basically types of packaging materials of paper, and packaging materials made out of plastic, the films. It is tied to a certain sector of industry, and that sector of industry is for manufacturers of gloves, very specific. Equally, this financial year, one of the other stays that we had is we had a stay on screws, nuts, bolts, and these are provided for under subheading 7318 or heading 7318 as indicated, and we had rates here increased to 35% from the rates that are provided for in the CET, which are at 10 and 25. The thinking behind this is that this is supposed to offer sufficient protection to discourage importation and encourage local replacement of the same or local production by making the locally produced goods more competitive in the market. So this is a category, some of the categories of items for which stays have been offered this financial year. Equally, we also had a stay on a product that is utilized as a raw material, but a product that is easily produced. This is starch. I think all of us growing up, and when we're in school, we have been, we're taught that starch is an easy to produce product, largely produced from carbohydrates. The major raw materials utilized to make starch are basically cassava and maize or corn, and there is quite a bit of importation of this category of goods. However, to encourage local production, Uganda, as a country, has opted to have this item come in at a rate which is higher than that is provided for in our common external tariff, at a rate of 25% instead of the rate that is 10% in our common external tariff.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jude. That was good insight in regards to the stages of application. So we're able to appreciate the fact that our amendments are protecting local manufacturers by increasing rates of items which are coming in that we can locally produce. We also want to move to the idea of duty remission. And we want to understand what is duty remission, number one, and how can duty remission help us advance our agenda of industrialization. If you can help us, give us more light to that.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Maybe before just we go to duty remission, we could run through some of the other stays for purposes of informing the public, and then we can dive into what a duty remission is and what is the difference between a stay and a duty remission. One of the popular stays that we had this year is that on electric motor vehicles as well as hybrid motor vehicles, where as a country, to encourage consumption of these categories of vehicles, duty was stayed, and we chose to apply a rate of 0% this year. The effect of this is that it lowers the costs of these categories of vehicles, and it encourages production, first of all, of these items, but most importantly, it encourages consumption of these vis-a-vis the vehicles that operate using fuel in entirety. The same stay was extended to electric motorcycles at a rate of 0%. As you may notice that the incentive or the stay provided for vehicles is for both vehicles, electric and hybrid vehicles. However, on the motorcycles, it's only electric motorcycles. This perhaps would bring into question what a hybrid vehicle is vis-a-vis an electric vehicle. A hybrid vehicle is that which has both, it operates both using an electric component and a fuel component, either say diesel or petrol, as well as the batteries. So it alternates the power transfer, and it's a category of vehicles that is common. You'll see that most of the vehicles that come in may not be necessarily fully electric, but they will be hybrid. It's a more common category. Equally, one of the stays that was introduced this financial year was a stay upwards on diapers, specifically baby diapers. That baby diapers are going to come in at the rate of 35% this year instead of 25%. And the thinking behind it is that there is sufficient local production and there are a number of local producers of these diapers. And these producers need protection, and that is in Uganda and the rest of the region, the EAC region. So the thinking behind it was that the rate would be increased to protect those that are producing the diapers locally, and this is in line with the government policy of import substitution. Maybe we can just run through the other stays. We had a certain stays on aluminium bars, rods, as well as aluminium tubes, and these stays are to a rate of 35% from 25%. This is first of all one to follow the principle that is provided for in the common external tariff, and that's the principle that similar items should attract similar rates. As you notice, bars and rods of steel as well as pipes or tubes of steel attract import duty rates of 35%. So this is aligning, part of the process of aligning the tariff to have similar products attract the same rates. So it's something we need to take note of this financial year as we do our importation, that the rate there has gone up from 25% to 35%. Okay, so that brings us to basically the few stays that we had, and perhaps speaking on what remission is, equally as spoken to earlier, we have changes that affect us and changes that are very specific to manufacturers. One such change is what is called duty remission. Now, briefly, duty remission is an incentive scheme that is provided for in our Customs Management Act, specifically to manufacturers. And it's an incentive scheme that is designed or avails specific incentives to manufacturers on their raw materials as well as their packaging materials. In the instance that they import these items at lower rates compared to those that are provided for in the CET, and these lower rates play a role of reducing the cost of production internally, and as such, it discourages consumption of these finished articles. So when companies produce locally competitively, then they can take advantage of the local market and save the foreign exchange that would occur in importing the complete product. So briefly, that's what duty remission is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jude. Can you give us the legal framework behind duty remission? Where do you get the legal mandate to implement this tax incentive?
Okay. Duty remission in itself is provided for under Section 140 of the Customs Management Act, but it's further operationalized using regulations. That in the ESC, regulations were developed specifically to operationalize duty remission, and these are called the duty remission regulations. And these regulations indicate clearly who qualifies, how do you apply for the remission, how is it vetted, and until the process when it's gazetted. So what happens briefly, if I was to run through, is that the Council of Ministers of the East African Community shall come up with a list of items that are to be considered for duty remission. And when that list is brought out through a legal gazette, which normally comes out at the end of June, it is published or shared. We normally administratively share this list with a document called an expression of interest, where we list the incentives that are available to manufacturers in a financial year. And we call them to apply in case they are interested. Now, it's important to note that duty remission in itself is an elective incentive scheme. So you only apply for it if you feel like you should take benefit, and it's because of the conditions there in duty remission. Some of the conditions therein are that when you benefit from duty remission, specifically the country remissions, you cannot transfer those goods to other partner states without without those other partner states charging you tax on those goods. So that brings us to maybe a discussion to what is, in addition to duty remission are of two types. We have what we call a country-specific remission and a regional remission. Now, the country-specific is that remission only exists in your country. You will notice that we, as customs, we operate in a customs union. The customs union is the 5 partner states, or slightly, it is getting bigger by the day. And it means that we ideally use the same law at importation, which is called the Customs Management Act, as well as the Common External Tariff, the CET. So when a remission is granted and it's a country-specific remission, it means that remission is available to Ugandan manufacturers and may not be available to the other manufacturers in the partner states. But because you take benefit, which is a benefit different from what the other partner states take, it's also the conditions therein is that when you trade in those partner states, you cannot transfer those goods without those goods attracting duty, because you're already advantage compared to the others. Then we also have a regional list. That regional list is available to all the partner states. It means that if you take benefit from a remission which is regional in nature, you can actually transfer these goods to the rest of the partner states, and these goods shall not be charged duty, the common external tariff in it. So that is briefly what I would say about duty remission. So you do, manufacturers apply for it, then they go through a process of vetting. That process of vetting is provided for. There's what is called a duty remission committee that is available in each of the partner states. They verify and then gazette your company, saying company X has taken this type of remission, and then the requirement in the law is that we are supposed to notify the other partner states through another gazette, which says that company X took benefit from remission, such that the other partner states can know what type of remission was granted to which companies in which partner state. So briefly, that is what duty remission is.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm reading a few comments here from our viewers, and one of them is that our voices are low. I hope our technical team is able to correct that. Okay, that is good, now that everyone can hear us. Thank you so much, Jude, for that insight on the legal framework. Now, can we know the items, the raw materials whose duty has been remitted for the benefit of manufacturers in order for them to have their cost of production reduced. Can you give us examples of these items and also which industries are benefiting from this facility?
Okay. Yes, this financial year we had a number of new remissions that were introduced. I'll briefly take you through them and the industries they are in. Maybe just to note that the remission, if it is for a certain industry, it only applies to that industry. And if it is open, then it would be available to all the other industries. So one of those areas is what is called organic surface active agents. These are basically chemicals that are available to all manufacturers, and they tend to be utilized in what is called the chemical and allied industries. The people who make paints, the people who use the chemicals for treatment, for bleaching, such items. So this item in the common external tariff, it attracts an import duty rate of 25%. But under the remission scheme, it is to be imported by manufacturers at a rate of 10%. So if you are a manufacturer and you utilize this particular category of item, the remission is available, you can still apply for it in the financial year. The other item that is available this financial year is clear primer. Primers, but the primers are basically utilized in the coating of iron sheets or of color-coated or corrugated sheets. And this is available to only manufacturers of iron sheets. So we have primers that are classifiable under the subheading as indicated, 390799. The next item that is available for manufacturers this year is coat color primer or colors for use in production of the different colored types of iron sheets. And equally, the remission available is to 0%, meaning that they would import these items at 0% import duty, and instead of the 10% that is provided for in the common external tariff. Maybe just important to notice that at importation, this remission only relates to import duty, but at importation we may have other tax heads, and those other tax heads are VAT, withholding tax, amongst others. So when I'm talking of remission and I'm talking of a remission, in this case, it's only for the import duty that is applicable. We also have an import duty available for manufacturers of school pencils, and it's available on a number of products. Those products are, for example, the erasers. When we were young, we used to call them rubbers. Also the aluminium strip that connects the wood to the eraser is available also under remission at a rate of 0% from 10%. The other remissions that are available, is on aluminium coils, specifically for manufacturers of kitchenware. So if you're in the industry of making kitchenware, plates, cups, pans, and all types of kitchenware that are made out of aluminium, the specific coils as indicated there under subheading 760611 are under remission this year to a rate of 0% from 25%. Just to re-emphasize that this is a country-specific remission, and it also, what it would mean is the conditions I mentioned earlier would apply to you. That if you make these items using this particular provision and you transfer them to a partner state, for example, Rwanda, and they don't have these amongst their country remissions, then the requirement that those items would pay import duty in the other country would arise. So we need to make, while we plan for the remissions, we should see, are we largely an export-oriented company, or we are producing largely for the home market? If you're producing largely for the home market, then the country-specific remissions would suffice for you. And if you're largely producing for the export market, then you should be looking for the regional remissions, because you should be able, unless your export market is not necessarily the EAC. We equally have remissions that we extended to manufacturers of lubricants and on a specific product called base oil. Base oil is the primary raw material utilized to produce lubricants, and it's available under remission this year from 10%, which is the import duty rate that you would ordinarily import the product, or what we used to import the product last financial year. And this financial year, we are importing it at 0% import duty. We have raw materials for manufacture of metal crown caps. Metal crown caps are basically what is utilized to close bottles of soda that are metallic, bottles of wines and spirits, those metallic crown caps. And some of the raw materials are as indicated. We have certain polymers, we have printing inks as indicated. We have printing inks, we have, so those specific raw materials are under remission at a rate of 0% for 1 year instead of 10%. Then we have also a category of raw materials for manufacturers of tires and tubes. In Uganda, we have manufacturers of tires and tubes. And maybe just to mention a few, we have CCLE, that is, we have RRZ, we have I think Modern Tires, Ginger, amongst others. These companies produce tires and tubes, and they utilized a number of raw materials. Some of the raw materials utilized in production of tires and tubes are carbon, zinc oxide, certain lubricating operations, certain plates of plastics. And you notice that we have two remissions there. We have remissions to 0%, and then we have remissions to 10% on the different categories of products, as you see in your screen, under 8 and 9. So remission, like I mentioned, is just a reduction on the rate from a higher rate to a lower rate for purpose of incentivizing certain industries. So if you're a manufacturer and you're not engaged in production of tires and tubes, then this specific remission will not extend however much you imported those products. Okay. Then we have also remissions for people who are engaged in the construction industry, specifically those who produce, those who are producing construction paper and or sandpaper and paints and brushes, and the remission available to them is as indicated, as you can see in 11, on certain materials, certain papers for production of sandpaper, as well as certain adhesives that are utilized to still in production of the sandpapers, as well as those that produce paint brushes, bristles and items like that. This is available, so if you've been in the industry or you've been a big importer of this, you could as well consider diversifying into production, considering that the production has been incentivized to discourage the importation of the finished article and perhaps encourage production of the raw materials such that these items can be locally produced. So briefly, those are the remissions, new remissions that we introduced this financial year that we would speak to, and which we encourage you all to take advantage of.
Okay, thank you so much for that insight. There are a few questions here that keep coming in, and one of them from Simon is asking kindly, what's the difference between duty remission and duty drawback? Can you give us an insight on that?
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Duty remission, as indicated earlier, is basically an incentive scheme whereby at importation, your raw materials come in at a rate, import duty rate lower than that provided for in our common external tariff or our CET, or for simple language, what we call our tariff book. So for example, in our tariff book, the raw material is attracts a rate of 35%. But under remission, if it is provided for, it may be coming in at 10% or 0%. That would be what duty remission is. However, duty drawback operates in a scenario where you pay taxes at importation at the rates, the CET, for a raw material. And then when you export those finished articles, the duty that you paid, or the portion of duty that was paid for production of those goods that were exported, can be refunded to you. So that is what duty drawback is. So maybe just to try to illustrate, if you imported, say, sugar, and you paid duty on sugar, say, let's assume that the duty on sugar is 100%, and you bring in 1 kilo, and you paid 1,000 shillings on that 1 kilo of sugar. And that 1 kilo of sugar, 10% of that sugar, which is utilized to produce a drink which you exported at 1,000 shillings, it means that that portion that was utilized for export will, the duty, which would be now 100 shillings, a fraction, the 10%, would now would be available for you to draw back. So what happens with management of duty drawback is that companies are supposed to, one, provide their input-output coefficients with our customs audit department well before they start production. These items will be, we test them against acceptable standards and then agree that this is your input-output coefficient, meaning this portion of what you import is what you utilize to produce this unit of product. So when you export and there is evidence of export, then you shall apply to customs and say that I paid duty of this amount on this product. I utilized it to make product X, which was exported, and of what I paid as duty, this fraction was utilized for producing a product for export, and then that duty that you paid, the fraction, shall be refunded to you. So briefly, that's what duty drawback is.
Okay, Simon, I think you've got...
for further detail, you can always get in touch with our Customs Audit Division.
Sure.
They manage this process, and they could guide you in detail on how they manage the duty drawback.
Okay, thank you so much. Just for purposes of our viewers, these changes in the duty remission are the new ones for this year. However, we have very many other raw materials on our duty remission lists that you can enjoy. And maybe if you can guide us, Jude, where these viewers of ours can find which other items that have been on the duty remission list the previous years, and how can they be able to benefit from these items.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you for bringing that up. There are a host of raw materials that are available under duty remission, as he has mentioned, and we are only presenting the new ones. If we are to present all of them, you would need about 3 hours to only go through the old ones as well as the new ones. However, every year Customs publishes a document I mentioned earlier called an expression of interest, where we compile the list of raw materials available for remission with their specific sectors. Now, we share these lists widely, but largely because the interested beneficiaries are industry, we share with the Manufacturers Association, which publishes these lists. But what we share is not the legal instrument. The legal instrument is actually the Gazette notices that are published every year that we are equally shared. Gazette notices are legal documents, or public documents that are shared every year. So when you go to the websites, the ESC websites as well as ours, you can find Gazette notices that were published, and these Gazette notices have the different available incentives or available remissions. However, what we do in the expression of interest that I mentioned earlier is that we categorize it quite clearly on what is a country-specific remission and what is a regional remission. But most importantly, we also indicate which industries are available to take benefit from these remissions. So this is a document that we share, and we shared earlier, and we can be happy to share once again, such that you see whether the industry you're in or the operations you're engaged in have any incentives that are available to you in forms of remissions for this financial year.
Okay, thanks so much. So viewers, you've heard, if you're interested in these raw materials, the gazettes are available on the websites of the East African community. So we need to move to the next area, and that is amendments in the structure of the CET. The CET is one of our legal frameworks in customs. So I'd want you to, first of all, to tell us what do you mean by the CET and what amendments have been made in this CET in regard to this financial year.
Okay, so briefly, when we say the CET or the EAC CET, is that the CET is a common external tariff. Common external tariff means that in the EAC, when we entered the EAC, 2005 or thereabouts, we agreed to form what is called a customs union, meaning that the EAC would be treated as one for customs purposes. And in agreeing to join the customs union, we decided that we would have a common external tariff. The word common being that it should be the same tariff rates for importations across the different partner states. So we introduced a common external tariff that is benchmarked or is premised on the international system for classification of goods, which is called the harmonized system. So internationally, all the partner states in the EAC are members of, first of all, the harmonized system of the WCO. As such, there is a requirement for us to classify international traded goods the same way at 6-digit level or subheading level. So we decided as EAC to form our common external tariff, first of all, following the tenets that exist in the harmonized system, but specifically to take care of our interests as a region. We made adjustment up to 8-digit level to cater for commonalities or similarities in that common external tariff. And in that common external tariff, what it does two things. One, it gives the unique classification or the unique nomenclature for internationally traded goods. But two, it also points out the import duty rates that are applicable to goods when imported. These are the rates we're saying that can be varied using other instruments, as I mentioned earlier, stays of applications or remission. But generally, it refers to the rates that are expected of goods if they have not been varied by any other instruments. Now, under it, we have a 4-band structure of rates. And that band structure is that the import duty rates applicable under our common external tariff is 0%, 10%, 25%, and 35%. That's what we call a 4-band structure. However, we also have what is called rates that are sensitive. Those are rates that exceed 25%. Now, the 4-band structure plus the rates that exceed 35% form our common external tariff. Now, the common external tariff, as mentioned earlier, this financial year was affected, and was affected in the following ways. Perhaps we can just, we shall project such that we can go through it, some of the changes. We have subheadings that were introduced that were new, and when I say subheadings, I refer to what is listed there at 8-digit level. For example, 17019920, that's called a subheading. And so we had changes that affected where we had subheadings that were introduced, new subheadings. We had subheadings that were deleted, meaning they were removed from the common external tariff. We also have subheadings that are basically created and deleted. Then we had changes in the description of those subheadings. In the common external tariff, each subheading has a unique description. And that description is one of what we utilize to classify these items. Then we have rates. So this financial year we had a number of changes that one affected some subheadings where we had some subheadings created, some deleted. We also had those that were text changed or the descriptions changed, and then we had where rates were adjusted. So maybe just to run through, under item 1, we had a new subheading created, and that subheading was 1701-9920. This subheading is available for sugar for industrial use, specifically other sugar which is not white refined. So sugar for industrial use that is not white refined would be catered for under this subheading. And the rate applicable under the new subheading would be the import duty rate of 100% or $460 per metric ton, whichever is higher. Then we also had subheadings that were deleted, specifically subheading 48211010 and subheading 48211090. These two were deleted and they were replaced by subheading 48211000, whose description would now read printed. You notice the ones that were deleted had two descriptions for labeling dry cell batteries and other. So they would be replaced with a new text called printed or indicated as printed, and the import duty rate was increased, or a new import duty rate was introduced at 35%. This particular subheading refers to certain raw materials or certain packaging materials made of paper. And what happened is that previously the two that were deleted used to be an ESC subdivision, meaning it was created by us in the community. But we have since reverted back to the harmonized system classification of 48211000 and introduced as a region a rate of 35%. Then another subheading that was affected, deleted, was 48041910 and 48041990. And these were deleted and replaced with 48041900. And the rate remained at 10% and the description was other. Now, maybe for the colleagues, particularly those that are involved in clearing, when subheadings like this change, you notice that our systems are designed in such a way that when you import goods and you warehouse these goods with a certain subheading, the expectation is that you will only warehouse these goods with the same subheading that warehouse these goods. The principle of putting in a blue shirt and getting out a blue shirt, basically, to simplify it. However, when these changes occur, like they occurred beginning July 1st, is that then when you try to warehouse, that HS which has been deleted or subheading will no longer be available for use. So you will not be able to warehouse these goods using the existing procedure in the system. The procedure that has been put in place to address this challenge is an administrative one. At the moment, what is happening is that you will be required, one, to show that indeed this subheading is no longer available, and you obtain a local manifest to allow you warehouse your goods using the new subheadings. The new subheading, in this case, for example, it would be 48041900. So the other subheadings that were affected, maybe we can just move down, there was also 48115910 and 48115990. These were deleted and replaced with 48115900. The import duty rates are 10% and the description was other at 3- level. So basically the other two descriptions for labeling dry cells and dry batteries, and then the other were merged into just one other. Then we had still in the structure, HS codes where the rates changed. Specifically 850690 00 and 8507 90 00. These are parts of dry cells as well as parts of batteries, automotive batteries as well as deep cycle batteries, the parts of dry cells. The rates were increased this financial year, effective July 1st, from 0% to 10%. So in your business, I'm sure if you normally bring these items, you'll notice that those items used to attract 0%, but now are attracting 10%. Rates of 10% in the region. And this change to the structure of the CAT is a change across the partner states. All the partner states that use the common external tariff are equally affected. Then we had an introduction of a new subheading equally under 2501, specifically 25010020 for seawater. This subheading didn't exist before, so it's a new subheading. Then we had still those that were deleted under heading 2106, and the reason for deleting and creating here was purely to align or correct an error in the structure of the CET. And the three subheadings 2106 90 91, 2106 90 92, and 2106 90 99 were deleted and replaced with 2106 90 30, 2106 90 40, and 2106 90 90. The rates as well as the descriptions of the subheadings were not affected. It's only the coding that were affected. Then we had also a change in text of subheading 17019910, where it was the text was changed to white refined sugar for industrial use. So that text was changed. Then we had also subheadings where rates were increased from 10% to 25%, and these are subheadings 721710, 721720, 72173010, 72173090, and 72179000. The rates here were increased from 10% import duty to 25% import duty this financial year. Then we had a change in text for subheading 21069010 by specifically including the words highlighted in yellow there and young children. So now the subheading text will read specially prepared for infants and young children. Initially it was just reading specially prepared for infants. So sometimes the reason why text of the tariff changes is to provide clarity. When the text appears like it's not clear or it's creating a lot of opinion or debate, then you can offer to provide clarity on the intention of the subheading and what it is intended to cover specifically. We also had subheading 382000, where the rates were increased from 10 to 25%, and subheading 39219010, where the rate was reduced to 10% from 25%. This specifically was done to address an alignment issue under the whole of chapter 39, heading 3921 as well as heading 3920, where all unprinted films are supposed to come in at a rate of 10% and all printed films are to come in at a rate of 25%. The way it was at the moment was that both the unprinted films and the printed films were coming in at a rate of 25%, which was not aligning with the existing structure that is there in the CET. So briefly, those are some changes we had to the structure. And we did have some other, I mentioned earlier, that we had some changes to the fourth band of goods. And the fourth band is basically an additional band. There's a band of where items that were initially increased to 35% in the region. As you'll notice in the last financial year there was a review of our common external tariff, and that review indicated that we needed as a region to introduce a fourth band. We used to have a 3-band tariff structure in the region, which was 0, 10, and 25, then the sensitive list. But the region felt like there were items that needed protection or enhanced protection, particularly agricultural items and such items. So they introduced a fourth band, which was 35%. But the region has continuously reviewed and has added some more items this financial year. So this financial year, the region agreed to add 10 new items to the fourth band. And briefly, those are the ones. It has cassava, it has fish of chapter 3. It has bovine animals. Bovine animals, basically, these are like the cows and items like that. Then it has sheep, goats, pigs. It has eggs. It has honey. It has coffins. We have nails. We have certain type of nuts, as you will see, and then footwear. Now, specifically for footwear, there were footwear that were 25% and footwear that was 35%. But in classification, similar items should have the same rates. One, to enable ease of application, but most importantly, to provide predictability to importers. So all footwear has now been moved to 35% under the fourth band this financial year. So briefly, that's how our structure of our CAT was affected this financial year, in addition to those changes that had occurred previously.
Okay, thank you very much, Jude. We have 2 questions that I think we can respond to. One is from an anonymous viewer, and they're asking us whether this webinar is in regard to customs amendments or domestic tax. This is customs amendments, and let's focus, or let's be reminded that what we are going to discuss is going to be customs. There's another question from Joseph, and Jude, if you can help us answer it. He wants us to explain to him what URA expects in regard to duty remission returns.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joseph. I think that's the
Joseph,
name.
yes.
What does URA expect of you in terms of returns for duty remission? First of all, like I mentioned earlier, the expectation is that if you're benefiting from duty remission, you shall provide returns quarterly. And the returns, considering that duty remission is a broad scheme that is available to different industries, the type of returns will not be similar, because if you produce transformers and I produce bottled soda, our returns shall look quite different. But the return is basically they want you to account for the raw materials that you brought under remission. That you brought 1 ton of steel coils, or you brought 1 ton of wire. What did you produce in the 1 ton of wire? Which product? You can say I produced nails, I produced chain link, and of the 1 ton, I used 200 kilograms to produce wire nails of this nature, and these wire nails were sold or exported, and I used maybe 500 kilos to produce chain link wire, and in my store I have 300 kilos as the balance of the raw materials. So basically that's what the return is. The format, whatever format you choose, should capture the elements of what has been brought in, what has been produced, what is waste, because we appreciate that in production there is waste. When you produce, there is waste. If there is no waste, you also indicate. So we are looking for the input-output coefficient of production based on the raw materials you're producing under, that you're bringing under remission. We are developing a system for doing the returns. This is still work in progress. Our customs audit team that manages these returns has been engaging to try to make it much easier to file your your returns based on the remissions that are granted to you. So briefly, that's what is expected of you. The return, you'll indicate what you imported, what you produced, any balances, any wastes, and then you do that accountability. That's what is expected of you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jude. Joseph, we hope that your question has been answered fully. So we're also going to dwell or look at those other changes that we had in the Excise Duty Act and the VAT Act in this financial year. And maybe you can take us through those changes as well, so that we're able to appreciate them as far as today's presentation is concerned.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. I will first start with the question that came in earlier that you responded to. What amendments are we discussing? Are we discussing the customs amendments or the domestic tax amendments?
True.
Our area of focus here is the customs amendments. However, in doing customs work, we also operationalize certain domestic tax laws. And of interest to us is that we may speak to changes in the domestic tax laws that directly affect customs operations and not necessarily those that don't affect customs operations. Now, such changes this year is we had an introduction of excise duty on certain category of goods. So we are going to project such that we can look at it together. For example, this financial year we had an introduction of an excise duty of 12% or 150 shillings per litre, whichever is higher, on a specific product called opaque beer. An example of that is Chibuku. Now, beer, excise duty is a local law, but that affects both locally produced goods as well as imported goods. So at importation specifically, would expect that if you import opaque beer, and this is to differentiate opaque beer from malt beer. Opaque beer is a different product from malt beer. So opaque beer is specifically under subheading 22060020. The excise duty of 12% or 150 shillings per litre would be applicable to such imports. Equally, this financial year, this is a continuation, but for purposes of clarity, an excise duty on plastic granules and plastic products was introduced, and with exceptions that the duty of 2.5% or 70 dollars per ton, whichever is higher, is applicable on plastic granules and plastic products. And certain sectors have been exempted from this excise duty. And some of those sectors include manufacturers of plastic pipes, paints, mattresses, plastic tanks, footwear, medical equipment, pharmaceutical packaging materials, textile materials with plastic, paper with plastic, rubber products, and plastics, among others. So if you're not in that category, the expectation, and you import the plastic granules or plastic packaging materials, then the excise duty of 2.5% or $70 per ton shall be applicable on those imports. Equally, we had some amendments to our VAT Act. You recall we talked about Baby Diapers App. We also had a repeal that baby diapers used to be exempted from VAT last financial year, specifically under paragraph 1(2), subparagraph 8, that this financial year baby diapers shall pay VAT, whereas they were not paying VAT last financial year. So please take note and make declarations as such. Then we had the scope of paragraph 1(2)(a) being expanded or amended. Previously, that provision in the VAT Act exempted VAT on the supply of animal feeds and premixes, but that text, the supply of animal feeds and premixes, has been replaced with a new text by expanding that scope to include the supply of animal feeds and mixed components, such as eggshells, feed additives, wheat bran, maize bran, premixes, concentrates, and seed cake. So you notice that the scope or the interpretation of that provision has expanded. So the ones highlighted in red are the new items that are exempted from VAT at importation this financial year. Of course, they are also exempted from VAT at local supply. Then we had paragraph 1WW of the second schedule, where the text was equally amended to read the supply of billets for further value addition in Uganda. Billets are basically raw materials of steel that when you make iron ore, you produce, the next product you make from iron ore is either slabs or billets. So they are big pieces of steel that are utilized to produce other steel products, such as the wire rods, amongst others. Now, at importation, the supply of these billets, as long as they're going to be used for further value addition in Uganda, would be exempted from VAT. However, previously, the text read the supply of all production inputs into iron ore smelting into billets and the supply of billets for further value addition in Uganda. So you notice that they've removed supply of all production inputs into iron ore smelting, because there are other items you could utilize to make, to do iron ore smelting. So they've limited the provision to only the supply of billets.
Okay.
Then paragraph YY was to the second schedule was repealed. So the supply of all production inputs necessary for processing of hides and skins into finished leather products in Uganda, and the supply of leather products only made in Uganda, now attract VAT. Last financial year, they did not attract VAT. Then equally, paragraph 1FFF, the supply of cotton seed cake was repealed. Repealed meaning it was removed. But you notice that whereas this paragraph was repealed, they had incorporated it up under the second item that we looked at. So briefly, those are the changes in our domestic tax laws that affect us as customs or affects our customs operations directly at importation.
Okay, thanks so much, Jude, for that insight. We shall move to our last item, which will now look at other considerations in this financial year as regards to tax amendments. Maybe you can take us through that.
Yeah, this financial year, we had some other changes that affected our common external tariff. For example, we continued with the stay of a common external tariff specifically for goods from COMESA, meaning that the common external tariff may not apply to certain categories of goods from the COMESA because of the agreement we have with COMESA. Now, it's important to note that under this agreement, there's a derogation list, meaning there's an exception list that not everything coming from COMESA shall come in at 0%. That derogation list has exceptions. We have some categories of goods that still will come in at a CET rates, then those that will come in at reduced considerations, but that are not zero. For example, those that will come in at 4%, like steel and steel products, those that will come in at 6%, like paper and paper products, and then those that will attract the CET rate, and those specifically, those are the items that are considered sensitive. So goods whose import duty rates exceed 35% would have an exception to this. But other than those exceptions, the categories of goods from COMESA would attract a rate of 0% because of this particular stay. Then, of course, we had a change to our fifth schedule of the Customs Management Act, specifically item 27. Now, the fifth schedule of the Customs Management Act is basically the exemption regime in our East African Customs Management Act, and it lists items and categories of importers who are exempt from taxes at importation. And specifically, item 27 provided for an exemption on plastic bag biogas digesters. However, the law has been amended there to now read biogas digesters. the thinking or its implication is that whereas in the past only plastic bag or only biogas digesters made out of plastics would be exempt, now all biogas digesters, whether made out of plastic or other items, would qualify for exemption this financial year. So briefly, those are the changes, the other changes that occurred to our policy this year.
Okay, thank you very much, Jude. We are going to, we are winding down, and I've been able to go through all the questions we have received. But from all our discussions, I hope our viewers are able to appreciate the fact that our tax policy and amendments this year have very many raw materials whose taxes have been reduced. And the idea is to encourage you to engage in production. And we also have very many other items whose taxes have been raised so as to encourage import substitution, as our panelist was able to elaborate. So as we close, Jude, would you have any parting shots in regard to the subject of the day?
Okay. The parting shots I would have, one is that yes, the policy as designed is largely industry driven. It is designed it falls within the government strategic plan of import substitution as well as export promotion. You notice that a lot of the benefits there are to spur internal growth and also to protect industry from competition from outside. And also to interest us that the budgeting process is starting. It is something that happens every year. It is our input that affects these policies every financial year. So in case we have any proposals we want to bring up, you can always avail them to URA. Specifically, you can, for customs amendments, you can drop your requests to the 10th floor, Trade Division. They shall be internalized. They shall be carried forward for discussions. And if found worthwhile, they could inform our next policy amendments for the next financial year. With that, I would want to thank you for listening to us this morning, and we hope that you've taken benefit from this engagement.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much, Jude. Thank you very much, our viewers. We hope that our discussion has been of great benefit to you. And with not so much to say, I'd want to wish you a very good day. Bye for now.
Uganda Revenue Authority, developing Uganda together.